Hello, hello, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our first episode of Contractor Compliance 101. We're starting with the fundamentals of building a solid foundation. Before we jump into today's topic and discussion, including meeting our guest speaker today, I want to go over just a few housekeeping items, including probably the question I get the most often here. This webinar is being recorded, so don't worry if you can only join for a little bit or you want to share it with colleagues, team members after. The recording will be sent probably an hour or so after the live event, after we end it, through our webinar platform. So you'll get that recording and can pass that along to whoever you would like. Additionally, we highly encourage questions and chats throughout today's event. You should, in your webinar kind of layout, you should have an option to submit a question and or a chat. Either one of those works. We'll make sure to monitor that. We probably won't get through all the questions, and we only have 30 minutes, so we're kind of on a little bit of a time crunch, but highly encourage those questions. We'll make sure we either answer them live today or we have a safety expert follow up after today's event and get your questions answered. Lastly, on housekeeping items, we have a survey that will come in, that will pop up at the end of today's webinar. We will try to end on time or maybe even a minute or two early to give you guys time to fill out that survey. We would really appreciate any feedback, comments, maybe tell us what your experience was like during today's event. We take all feedback. We love all feedback and take it into consideration. So please take just 30 seconds. There's just a few questions to kind of give us some feedback in the survey at the end of today's event. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker here. So myself, I'm Liv Carter. I oversee marketing here at Safety Services Company, but I'm also welcomed here by Justin Bilodeau. Justin is our Director of Fulfillment here at SSC, or Safety Services Company. Justin, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and what you do or what you're passionate about?
Yeah, thanks. So as Liv said, I'm the Director of Fulfillment at Safety Services. So I've been with the company just over 8 years. I actually started in the compliance department for about 5 years, up to managing that department before moving over to fulfillment. Now I'm over our content, our physical products that go out to our customers, all parts of fulfillment that we offer here. But yeah, I'm really excited for this. I think it's going to be a lot of beneficial information for our guests.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is Justin does a lot, he does it all, and he does it all really well.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. Last one might be a little bit based on opinion, but I think we fulfill things pretty well in general.
Yes. No, we are so excited and appreciate, Justin, you just taking the time to go through some questions we have on this topic. And again, audience, just highly suggest submitting questions throughout today's event. So with that, why don't we get started? I want to start with talking about training and education and how do you ensure compliance, awareness among your entire team as contractors. And I want to start with a question, Justin, on, from your perspective, what are some of the foundational elements of compliance?
Yeah, so I think when we're referring to foundational areas of compliance, there's a lot of different moving pieces with it, but the ones that are the most impactful and the most important and are pretty much going to be across the board for any contractors are going to be keeping up with all of their liability insurance, making sure that all of their employees are properly trained and they maintain that training. Any of their safety statistics that they report or their EMR ratings from their workers' comp is going to be really impactful for overall compliance. And then just all forms of documentation when it comes down to your safety manual or maybe company certifications that you get, is making sure all of that is kept up to date and reviewed regularly.
Yeah, yeah, and I know we'll kind of go over these 4 items a little bit, more in depth later on, but I just want to follow up with, and it might seem like an obvious question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Why is it so critical for contractors, in today's all of this regarding the foundational elements? Why is it so critical for contractors in today's regulatory environment and the environment that we're in?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it comes down to just overall safety of their employees and the liability that is potentially there for hiring clients that are bringing contractors onto their job site. Because these contractors aren't employees of the hiring client, so there's a certain amount of risk that they're taking on by bringing them in on certain projects and things like that. So there's a lot of boxes that need to be checked, making sure that you are confident as a hiring client, everyone that's coming on your job site is operating safe, and then making sure that all employees are going home safely at the end of the day and not posing a risk to anyone they're working with.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And um, you know, this next question I have kind of focuses more on some of the common challenges that, you know, contractors experience today when bidding for jobs and working with hiring clients. So I'm curious, and maybe our audience, if you want to put in the chat or submit your thoughts via question, what are some of the common compliance challenges that contractors face that you've seen when bidding for jobs? I know you touched on kind of those 4 elements. Are those kind of the same in the same wheelhouse of common challenges?
Yeah, I think that all of those pose sort of their own type of challenge that contractors can face. I think one of the biggest issues that contractors run into are the time sensitivity on getting into compliance because you're competing with other contractors that work within your industry. So a lot of times being able to become compliant, you want to be the first one there so that you don't end up losing a job bid to someone else or anything like that, but then also the resources of being able to maintain that compliance because contractors are regularly going to be checked and audited when they're working for a hiring client. It's not a one and done type of thing. So if you allow those things to sort of backslide, you can end up, losing a contract, something like that, without even knowing it until it's too late.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to talk about challenges or problems without talking about some solutions or suggestions here. So, here on the slide, we kind of have some suggestions. Can you kind of talk us through what these suggestions entail, to help our audience overcome some of those top challenges that you mentioned?
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and start from the top down. For consistent training and education, it's one of the main things that you need to monitor is how frequently you need to do awareness level training with your employees or overall certifications that your employees may have, and always have visibility on when that retraining needs to happen. Don't wait until it's expiring and then an employee specifically can fall out of compliance. Sort of develop a training plan and have a timeline that goes along with that. In regards to up-to-date documentation, this again, sort of the same thing. Make sure you know when your documents are going to expire, especially your insurance, because any items that have an expiration date on it are usually going to be the quickest ones that can have you fall out of compliance without having some sort of grace period. And then proactive safety strategies, just always identifying ways as a company of how we can do better and be safer, not just checking the boxes and doing the bare minimum, because it's not about just doing the minimum requirements. Hiring clients and companies in general should always have safety top of mind, and compliance goes right in hand with that. And then leveraging support resources. This is going to come to training providers, maybe compliance solutions through a third party. There's nothing wrong in not having the ability to do everything in-house, especially if you're a small to medium business. But leveraging those types of resources and making sure that they're at the professional level that you want them as a contractor, because it is going to be related to safety, which is important.
Yeah. I would imagine, joining events like this could be included in leveraging support resources and kind of making the most of the resources and tools available. But I love how you also mentioned the expiration dates and grace periods being kind of non-existent with those. That's a really good call out for our audience here.
Yep.
Now, Justin, I kind of want to transition us to talk about compliance as a competitive advantage, and how to stand out. I think you kind of touched on it a little bit on, there's, I don't want to say the bare minimum, but there's a bar, right, on what you have to do, but how can you really make the most out of compliance and safety, you know, proactive safety measures to stand out, especially in a crowded market. So, uh, my first question is, in what ways can maintaining a high grade, right, when it comes to compliance, provide a competitive advantage? I'm curious on your perspective there.
Yeah, so when you're maintaining a compliant grade or a high grade specifically with a hiring client, that ensures that you are going to be able to maintain that contract if it's already in place with the hiring client, so you don't risk losing a job bid or anything like that and being surprised by it. And the other part is that, like we talked about before with the fundamentals of compliance, if you are maintaining your compliance regularly, a lot of those common items other hiring clients are going to be looking for when they're trying to source contractors. So making sure you stay on top of your compliance is going to give you that exposure to potentially getting additional contracts rather than being reactive to those requirements, being proactive and staying compliant.
Right, right. So really a combination of existing jobs and future, jobs and bidding. With that, I'm curious, what are the areas of compliance, you would say hiring clients care most about? Is there, a certain element that they really pay attention to, or what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, and this is sort of doubling down on what we spoke about earlier, which sort of I think highlights the importance of these specific items. But the insurance, making sure that you have the right liabilities in place, and you're always in contact with your insurance broker or your insurance carrier, because when renewals come up, that can be a really big headache for contractors, especially if they're working for multiple hiring clients. So the longer you wait to address a renewal or an insurance certificate, the more likely it's going to impact your compliance. Um, Again, with training goes more to employee safety. A lot of our contractors are going onto a different hiring client's job site. So when it comes to hiring client compliance, a lot of that is risks that employees could be exposed to on the hiring client job site, but it might not apply to that contractor because it's not within their work type, but it doesn't mean that it's not a potential hazard or risk by going onto someone else's location. So, really making sure to keep up with all of that. Hiring clients are really specific on making sure when people are going to come to their job site, they're ready to be safe. Um, and then safety statistics, again, this is usually looking back 3 years when it comes to compliance. And if you don't have any incidents or you don't have a high EMR rating for your workers' compensation, it shows that you're serious about safety because you haven't had those incidents or anything like that. So that makes you stand out. And it's really difficult once you have an incident or a high rating for your EMR for that rating to go down, because it's just time that you have to wait to have your rating go down. And then documentation, again, having your HSE manual with awareness level policies that are in there that gives the hiring clients peace of mind that, oh, they don't just have awareness level training, they actually have a written policy or program in place. They may not practice this on their job site because it's not something that they're exposed to, but when they come onto my job site, I at least know that they have this in place that they can reference.
Mm. Yeah, so what I'm hearing, and that was all really insightful, Justin. What I'm hearing is, and I know this slide looks really repetitive, so audience, if you're like, we already saw this slide, yeah, it sounds like it all matters, right? It
Yeah,
all matters to hiring clients, and maybe in different aspects, but these four areas are really that foundation.
right, right. And I would say these are the ones that can impact a grade the heaviest and the quickest, because they're so important to those hiring clients.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great call out, Justin. One more question before we kind of get to our last topic and we talk a little bit more on platforms and contractor management tools. Um, how can companies keep up with, the ever-changing landscape, let's say, of compliance, to stay competitive? I mean, we've got um, legislation changes. I know California, we've been talking about that with California's new OSHA regulation on workplace violence. What are your thoughts on how can companies or our audience here stay up to date or keep up with the ever-changing landscape?
Yeah, so I would say that the best method in doing that is to always be proactive and continually monitoring your requirements when it comes to compliance, regardless if it's on a platform, like you said, we're going to get to on the next portion, or just communication from a procurement department with a hiring client or emails of notifications. In most cases, contractors, if they have a new requirement, it's going to be communicated to them somehow to hopefully give them as much time as possible to be able to meet whatever that new requirement is. But if you wait until it's impacting you in a negative way, you're then behind the eight ball on that, where other companies that may be proactive, as soon as they get a notification, they don't wait until it impacts a contract or hiring client they're working for, are going to be able to beat you to that requirement and potentially get a job bid that you would have been qualified for, but you waited a bit more time before you got it.
Right, absolutely. And you mentioned notifications there, Justin. Are there common, forms and notifications?
So it's usually going to be email notifications that go out to contractors. But again, if they're using a platform, they'll use that as a vessel to communicate to contractors as well. So it's always important when you see emails that are coming through a contractor or through a hiring client that you want to make sure that either you're working with or that you're trying to get a job bid on, that you immediately open that up. That should be at the top of your list. One other really great resource in relation to how you mentioned OSHA requirements and regulatory updates is you can go onto the OSHA.gov website and subscribe to multiple different types of newsletters that are available to anybody. You don't have to, pay for those notifications or anything like that. So when there are major regulatory updates, or just new safety information that could be really important to your industry as a contractor, you have that, basically as quickly as OSHA provides it out to their customers.
Yeah, that's a great call out and great, yeah, great resource there, absolutely. So you mentioned platforms, and I want to talk about those as kind of a tool for notifications and communication. So, let's talk about utilizing third-party management solutions or platforms, also known as contractor management platforms. I know, and we've got a slide here that shows kind of just a few. We've got Avetta and ISN, ComplyWorks. Those are just a few. Um, what role do third-party management solutions or contractor management platforms play in streamlining the compliance process for contractors?
Yeah, so what they really do is they standardize the compliance portion when it comes to hiring on a new contractor. Where before it was sort of like an informal relationship, you would need to know a certain person within a company to even be, considered for a certain job. And now a lot of these hiring clients that are moving to these platforms are utilizing them as sort of a resource to find those new contractors. So, being on those platforms and utilizing a service to make sure you're getting the best benefit out of it is the best way to get those additional contracts.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, I would imagine then when we're talking about compliance and then we're talking about using that as a competitive advantage, I'm sure there's some overlap here as well. So I'm curious, in what ways do these platforms or solutions provide a competitive advantage when bidding for jobs or working with hiring clients?
Yeah, and I think again, it's all managing everything in one single location, where if you're not utilizing a platform, when you're going through that procurement process, you're having to do everything all over again, over and over and over again. On a platform, it's a lot of those common requirements that we talked about are now housed all in one place where hiring clients can view that information, but a contractor only needs to address it at one point, and then it's available to anyone that's, connected into their platform. So, it makes everything a lot easier, and again, has that level of hiring clients aren't as concerned about liability, knowing that they can just sort of go in and check if a contractor is compliant or not just by a couple clicks.
Right, absolutely. And to our audience, I'm kind of curious if anyone uses, and maybe we go back to that previous slide, if anyone uses one or many or other platforms and want to put it in the chat or submit via question, we can definitely ask Justin some specific questions there, put him on the spot a little bit more. But um, with that, I am curious, what should our audience keep in mind when using these platforms? Are there any, tips or tricks or suggestions you have?
Yeah, I would say some of the things that we probably run into the most when it comes with working with contractors, specifically on these third-party platforms, is that as a contractor, one of the things that you're required to do on almost every platform is add your work types. What type of work are you able to do that fits within your industry? And sometimes a contractor maybe only has one hiring client they're required to be on a platform for. So maybe they're only doing one type of work for that hiring client, so they think that's all that they need to add. But like I referenced before, it gives you exposure to all of the hiring clients that are on that platform, and they use it to find those contractors. If you're limiting your work types to just one and you do many different things, you're only going to show up in results for what you enter into the system. So that's a really important thing that a lot of people aren't really aware of because they're, sort of focused on the one hiring client they're working for.
Mm,
And then, one of the other things is that if you if you have a subscription to a platform for a specific hiring client, make sure not to let it lapse, maybe just because a contract expired or a job finished or something like that. With the amount of hiring clients that are moving to these platforms, it's more likely, especially if you're a safe company, that you're going to have a hiring client that requires you to have, one of these platforms or one of these solutions. And if you just focus on one job, let it expire, in most cases, you have to pay a reactivation fee to get the account back up. You could lose documents or information by allowing the account to expire, and then you have to go through the whole process again of getting compliant. So if you keep these active and you're, proactively looking for more work and you're keeping everything compliant, you're going to have that benefit of always being at the top of that list and finding more work.
right, right. And, to your point, new hiring clients are joining these platforms every day.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And I know there's some lists out there, and it's a letter you get or an email of we're
Mhm.
joining this, and you got to get on. So I think that's a really good call out on, not just thinking current state, but future state and potential jobs and opportunities.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, Justin, I have kind of a somewhat follow-up question here. You mentioned, you might have a hiring client that wants you to get on one platform, and you might have another client that wants you on another. Do you have any tips or tricks or suggestions when it comes to, hey, I have to be on two of these platforms or three of these platforms? Um, to kind of stay proactive and compliant. Do you have any thoughts on how our audience can best go about that?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things to know about most of these platforms is a lot of them have the same standard types of requirements, but maybe some of them have different timelines of when documents need to be uploaded or something needs to be provided within the account. So this sort of ties into not focusing on just one hiring client, but don't focus on just one platform. When you have your OSHA logs ready, when you have your quarterly statistics ready, don't wait until it's past a deadline to put them into your platform. Do it all at once. If when OSHA logs are going to be due, when your insurance is going to expire. Take care of all of that at once. It might be a little bit more work at the time,
Yeah.
but it's going to save you a lot of headache later.
Yeah, way more peace of mind, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Justin, we're at time. I want to, kind of leave you the space. Any final remarks or thoughts about this topic? It was really good discussion, but any kind of takeaway you hope our audience, takes from today's event?
Yeah, I think that probably the most important thing is just realizing that in this world and in the 8 years that I've been with safety services, we've just seen more and more utilization of these platforms of the form of compliance. So
Mm.
contractors' adoption of the platform, getting familiar with these, making sure that you're keeping up with all of the information, it's not going to be going away. The more successful you are as a company, the more successful you are with safety, the more hiring clients you're going to get contracts for, which is what everybody wants, right? But with
Yeah.
that is most likely going to come with new platforms. So adoption and familiarity with these and not seeing them as a hurdle, but as a tool is going to be really vital to your success as a contractor and as a company.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Not as a hurdle, but as a tool.
Yeah.
That I'm gonna have to get that like on a mug or something like that. A t-shirt. No, awesome. Well, Justin, thank you again so much for your time today and all the insight you provided. For our audience, thank you all for taking some time out of your day to join us. Like I said, this webinar was recorded, so we'll send out the recording in about an hour or so it'll be sent. And then our contact information is on the side here. You can scan our QR code or that QR code to go to our website and learn more about Safety Services Company. But, almost more importantly, feedback. We would love to hear what you thought of today's event. As soon as I press this red X and end the webinar for everyone, a survey is going to come up, and we would just love any insight that you might have and any thoughts from today's event. But that's all we have until next time. So thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me, Liv.
Yeah, bye, guys.